Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening. So, I wanted to go into it's not particularly an article or just one article, it's actually a conversation about some of the things that are happening in local neighborhood schools, primarily here in California and Los Angeles County, and some of the neighboring cities outside. It could be Compton, Watts, Inglewood, Culver City, Pasadena, all of the like local school districts that are unified school districts of neighboring cities and outward that are not very that far out. But what I've noticed, and I'm going to put some of what I've experienced because if if I haven't mentioned it before, that I have um, been in the field of education. And what I have noticed is several different things. Um, I do notice that certain neighborhoods, certain areas, if there's more money or more, let's say, parents that are doing economically well, the school shows that as a reflection. And so I've known this to be true. And there's sometimes it's weird because there could be a school that might be less than 5 miles neighborhood and the parents are doing well economically, which means they maybe have really good jobs. The school is a reflection of that. And I had noticed that in my travels to different, educational sites. And there are some exceptions. There are some schools that are in neighborhoods that aren't that great, but you have a community of people who get together and who have a lot of great concern for their students and their children. And that also shows a reflection of how the school's performance is and how the school looks from the outside and from within, and what type of teachers they employ. And you can tell when the kids are learning. You can tell when they're learning to read, when they're learning math, when they're learning new concepts, when they're gaining something and when they're able to move on, they're advancing, whether it be language, whether it be, just socializing with other children. And then there are some places where, clearly there's a lack of materials, there's a lack of effort, not only with just teachers, but with parents primarily. And then also, not enough money is being filtered into the schools because you can see it, because you can see the materials are not that available or readily available for kids to access. There's not very much communication in terms of teacher and parent. Um, and then you can also see other things that you don't want to really see in schools, such as morale and staff. Sometimes the teachers may not get along with other teachers or administrators. There could be a rift. It could have anywhere to do from just regular relations, having differences of opinion, down to getting a raise. And so I know recently there have been some schools that have had some strikes over not getting enough pay. And we also have schools that have a big, big problem with race relations. And that's primarily what this is entitled. Racism and discrimination is still in local schools. So it's still there. Um, Unfortunately, I don't know that this is an easy fix or an easy situation that can be solved or resolved even. I know there has been some efforts in some staff members to resolve issues by bringing up other issues of trying to teach the kids how to get along with one another and how to treat one another as equal despite the differences in skin color, the differences in language, the differences in gender, and to try to teach kids how to get along and how to respect one another and how to be courteous and how to be, you know, careful about how you use your words and how to conduct yourself around adults and other children. But we have a big problem with racism and discrimination in schools where it is hidden a lot of times. And it isn't talked about very often because a lot of times you'll have people that will do basically the basic teaching where they just come in, they teach what is required of them to teach, and they don't go beyond and above that. And then you have some teachers that will go beyond and above that. And then you have some teachers who harbor their own biases. And every now and then it will come out in the way they approach teaching different students. And so when they hire these teachers, they're not necessarily expecting them to come in with these biases. They're expected to teach kids on an equal level to where they treat all kids the same. They're supposed to teach all kids in the same fashion, but that doesn't always end up being the case. And so sometimes kids will be talked to a certain way. One kid, if he looks different or he's from a different social or economical or ethnic class or group, he may be treated a little bit differently than another student. And a lot of that doesn't always come out until you see some of these incidences that have come out more often. Sometimes it doesn't come out until, like, well, now since we've got the cell phone, some people have been getting caught. We've had some more recent incidences where teachers have been getting caught. And so this right here, it was talking about a racist yearbook cover thanking a 50-year-old teacher, New York school diversity plan, and what's new in education today. So this actually is here located in Los Angeles. And so as you can see, they got rid of this article. And maybe the school requested that this article not be revealed, but this school is the Black Mountain Middle School yearbook cover featured an old map with a racial slur. School workers recalled the yearbooks and scratched off the offensive word. So this is Poway Unified School District. So it says in and around Los Angeles and California nationwide. And then when you click on reading it, the article, nothing comes up. Just other articles about other schools and other things that have happened. But this particular article, I believe, was pulled because of maybe the possibility of it being really offensive to particular groups of individuals. And so a lot of times school districts, what they'll do is they don't really fire these teachers. They suspend them. They may write them up, but they don't fire them. It takes a lot of effort. And I believe from what I was told, it has to do with paperwork. It has to do to be honest, if people are what is called tenure, if they've worked there for a number of years, it's not that easy to just fire them, especially for even a racial slurs, even if it's highly offensive. So you'd have to have probably that one particular teacher, maybe somebody videotaped them saying something offensive and it goes viral enough to cause enough controversy that they will eventually be more than just suspended, but maybe asked to leave. Um, but even with that, there have been many controversies in school districts that are enough, you would think would be enough to fire someone, but they were unsuccessful at that. They might go to the extent of suspending a person or writing a person up, or they may even, from what I heard, LAUSD had something called teacher jail, where they're suspended, but they're not able to go to the school site. And I don't know if they suspend them without pay. I believe they can still get paid. They're just suspended from coming into work. So I could be might maybe off. I guess every this district does something a little different than the next. But from what I was told, is that you'd had to do something really serious to a child or to a staff person enough to where law enforcement was involved in order for you to not only get arrested but fired. And so just racial slurs alone is not enough unless you have staff members and then parents complaining, and then they have to remove that person from the school. And a lot of times what they do to these teachers is they move them from one school to another school. So if there's an incident that happens, a lot of times, if it's bad enough, they might, instead of firing that teacher, they may remove that teacher from that particular school. And school districts have more than one school that is operating under them. And so a lot of times they will move teachers around if there's a problem. And so even if it's a teacher that is very discriminatory towards staff members, towards students, if they display like a type of race hating or racial slurs of any type, and so that maybe it's in another site where it can be actually read. But there are many different instances of either racism or discrimination issues. And so there's also there's an incident that happened here. A Clovis teacher accused of racist comments issues a response. Now this happened right here in California as well, but it's Clovis East High School. A teacher was accused of telling a student to go back to their country in their disgrace because the student was or on her phone during the Pledge of Allegiance. And there's also a statement behind that. So that's another incident. There's also California high school student, and there's sometimes the students are involved in racist rants. Then you have California teacher who is anti-military. I don't know if you've seen that recently. He was also in a racist rant, and some parents are trying to protest that teacher be removed from the school or actually lose their job, which he may be removed from the school, but he may not lose his job. It's a possibility he may still be able to keep his job. They will move him from the school because of the backlash of parents, but losing his job, that may not be something that may happen. So this is another issue that I believe this one also went viral, where it was about the college investigates the teacher's racist taunts to a couple. And so the teacher may face disciplinary actions after a video of her telling a Long Beach couple to go back to their home country. And so I'm sure people have seen this video. This video is showing the woman, and I guess she's walking away, and the couple's behind her. And so she is taunting them with racist taunts.
Oh, you're going to my photo now. Wow. It's not a photo. I want to understand why. Not when your wife is photographing. I want you to tell everybody why you told us to go back to our country. You need to go back to your home country. And what does that mean? What? Raised in the United States, and you told me to go back to our country. I never voted for you.
And so this is a prime example as well. And all this is happening here, mind you, most of this is happening in California. Two, there have been other things that have not been caught on camera that have been gone on for like, you know, for as long as schools have been around. And so this is not a surprise to me. Like I have said that I actually work around people whom I have witnessed, and I've seen things happen that are very, very, you know, questionable as to how did they get to stay here so long. But then I thought about it and I said, okay, the person probably has friends. They've probably been there for many years. They've built a repertoire around the people that are in administration. They feel as though they're untouchable and that they can't get fired and no one can touch them. They feel a sense of privilege, and that goes without saying, the white privilege, where if you're white, you can kind of get away with saying things if you're in a position of power to defame others, make others feel lesser or inferior than you are. And there is a clique among certain individuals at some of these places of employment because they feel that they have to protect one another because they run pretty much run these organizations, or they want to be in control of the organizations so that other people or people that are of color feel defeated, and that there's nowhere for them to turn. There's no one you can talk to. And if you talk to them, there's not much that's going to be done. And then it's flipped around as if you're the aggressor, or either you're the perpetrator, you're the one that is causing the problems. So they'll find or dig something up on you so that they can quickly either remove you from the situation and move you around, move you to somewhere worse, or they will just find a way to get you fired, you know, so that they can cover their tracks of what kind of individual they really are, knowing that they probably shouldn't even be in those positions of, you know, because they figure they can get away with it because they have other people who do the same thing that are in positions where they have some kind of pull or some power over others. And so that is the reason why a lot of these establishments, they only hire a certain number of people. They know who to hire. And a lot of it isn't just based on, oh, you know, this person is qualified, they have the education, we're going to hire them. No, some of this is my friend, this is my sister, this is my cousin, I'm hiring them. Or this person is white, this person is attractive looking, this person, you know, won't tell on me if I'm doing something that is actually against the rules. They're supportive of me because they're doing something wrong, I'm doing something wrong. And so a lot of the things that they say in their rule books, they don't follow themselves. And so that's the reason why you've had these incidences go on for so long. And then Now you have people catching some of these people, either on the clock or off the clock, saying the things they're saying, and they're being shocked by it, which they shouldn't, because these people have always been there. They've always been around. They've always thought the way they thought, and they've always had those attitudes. It's just some people are better at hiding it than others. And what I would term it as is a closeted racist, or somebody that is closeted about their biases. So what they do but they're not that good at hiding it to the point to where it doesn't come out every once in a while. So sometimes it comes out in how they treat your kids in the classroom, where they'll be more punitive to an African American student rather than a student that is white, or a student that is non-African American. Or they will treat staff members a particular way. They may be a little more aggressive or more dictative to people of color. And when it's someone that isn't of color, or somebody that is white, or somebody they feel is on their equal playing field, they're more, welcoming, and they're more, talkative, to the point to where it's like you and I are the same. And you know where I'm coming from, I know where you're coming from, and you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back kind of attitude. It's more more like a welcoming type of greeting rather than a dictatorship. So a lot of times you'll get that in these schools. People know what to say, when to say it, but every now and then it slips out. And some kids now, they're savvier, they have cell phones, they've been recording this stuff. And then that might be why they tell kids to turn off the cell phones, not just because they don't want them to text during tests. That's specific. If you say we're having a test on this day, do not have your cell phones on, or do not have your cell phones on in the classroom where they make noise and disturb the other students. Those are legitimate reasons, or they could get stolen. It's on you. You're responsible for it. Leave it at home or whatever, or only use it in the event of an emergency. But some kids have been able to record some of the racist rants from some of these teachers. These are the way these teachers have always felt. It's unfortunate, but it's always been like that. I've personally seen where there's groups of teachers who will kind of clan gate, and I have seen this. I will be honest. I was trying to avoid it again, but there's groups of white teachers who voted for Donald Trump, and they won't say it, but there has been a few that have said that they had voted for Donald Trump. And so ever since that election, it has caused sort of like a social divide, even in school districts. And I don't think this has been talked about, but it has created somewhat of a divide. Now, there was already a divide, but there's even more so of a divide now because of all of the new things that have come about. So some people are able to handle or tolerate the people that are like this. So they're able to hold down a job and deal with difficult individuals. And so either way, you're going to deal with difficult individuals on a day-to-day basis, but some things people can tolerate and other things people just can't tolerate. And racism and discrimination are two things that are hard for some people to be able to tolerate. And sometimes there are African Americans or people that are of color that work these jobs underneath someone who is a racist or who is very discriminative, or both. And so, the things that they say and the things they do that are really, really, really against the grain, they should be written up for it. They should be fired, but they're still working there and nobody says or does anything. And if you say anything on these people, you could jeopardize your chances of employment. And they know this, so they use that as a weapon against you. while you're at these organizations. So a lot of times they don't get caught for those reasons. Until now, we've been seeing this on these video cameras where people have hide their racism and their discrimination and their attitudes. Their ego is there and they can't hide who they are. And so it comes out every now and then that they have a problem with blacks, or they have a problem with women, or they have a problem with people in the military, or they have a problem with particular religions or Muslims. Whatever their issue is of bias or discriminative practice, it comes out every now and then and again. And so a lot of times it depends on the severity level of what it is that they do to a student or to staff, whether or not they're going to continue working there. But a lot of times what I said that they do is they'll move people around, move teachers around rather than fire them. And a lot of times the people who are the ones that get fired are people who are not in certified status. They're not certificated. And so if you're not really a certificated teacher, you can be a teacher and not have a certificate and be like an aide, or you could be like maybe an assistant, or you can be somebody that's a child care worker and you're not really necessarily certificated. Maybe you have some units, but it's easier for those people to get fired. Or maybe you're just a sub. And a lot of times you don't have a union backing you, you don't have a lot of support, and you don't have, it's just like the police department. You have some good cops, and then you have a lot of bad cops that are there. And the good cops sometimes are overshadowed by the bad ones. And so it's the same in the world of teaching. You'll have some really good teachers who you wish they could always be there to teach. And then you have some teachers who are there all the time, but they're not great teachers. Their attitudes are bad. They have biases. They have social biases. They have issues within themselves. They hide it. They bring their problems from home to the workplace, take it out on other staff, or they have their own social biases and then they take it out on staff, and they can't admit that they're a racist, but it comes out on how they treat the kids in the classroom and how they treat other staff members. And every now and then when those things come out, they don't always get caught on camera. And so these are the things that parents, I don't think they realize it happens a lot in these schools. And so now we're now seeing some of the things come out in real time, like you see or hear the comments, and then, people get shocked, like, oh, how could he say that to us? Do you know how many teachers are working at these schools who they might like Nazis? They might be a part of a group that is the alt-right. They might be a part of a white supremacist group. They might promote, some of the things that we're seeing that don't sit well with some people in just everyday life. The hatred that's out there. Some of these individuals may very well be a teacher at a local school where your child is attending. And so if you're ever wondering if your kid is singled out a lot more than the other kids, or if they happen to look different from your kid, there's never a celebration for them, or very rare, or the way kids are talked about in the classroom. Well, Johnny is, perfect, and Tyrone, he's a problem. He's always a problem. He's always tearing up things. He's always treating the kids in the classroom bad. It's always something negative about Tyrone, but nothing is negative about Johnny. Nothing is negative about Becky. Everything's perfect about them, but nothing is ever good about Tyrone. Nothing's ever good about Sheila because it's something always wrong with those particular individuals. And then you start to notice some of it may be real. Maybe there are some issues, but if it's unusual where these kids seem to always be the problem and they happen to be kids of color, you would want to wonder why is it always that particular group of kids are a problem. And so there are classrooms like that where there are some teachers that they have some hidden biases or discriminatory practices, and it doesn't come out until like little at a time, or sometimes it is abrupt. It is abrupt, but it happens really fast, and you have to document, or you have to, and sometimes even documenting incidences is not enough because it's your word against that other person's. Documentation is not enough. So to document what a person is doing is not enough because they can still say, well, we weren't really physically in that room. We didn't see what happened. So a lot of times the best way to catch some of these teachers is to actually tape them, videotape what they say, videotape what they're doing to the kids that show that they're being discriminating. And a lot of times when they're little kids, this is the sad part, when they're really little kids, they can't talk for themselves. They can't defend themselves around these type of teachers. And so that's the sad part. Now, when they're teenagers, it's different because they're able to videotape something that was said or something that was done. They have sense enough to tell, but kids that are like really young, that don't know any better, they don't have any defense. And so the only defense they do have is if there's another individual in there that sees something isn't right. And a lot of times you can ask that other person, because you have to be careful, because sometimes another individual working in that room may not want to say anything because of the fear of just being singled out or being told, well, why did you say that? Because, with teachers that are working at places like that for that many years, you best believe they're not the only one that harbors that same attitude. And so they've been protected. And so that's the reason why they feel as though they can get away with what they do for so long. And so the only reason why that a lot of this stuff is coming out now is because people are tired of it. And a lot of people have been affected by this for so long that, the only time it stops is when people say enough is enough. We've had enough of this teacher so-and-so who doesn't like Black people, or who doesn't like military people, or who doesn't like, Muslims, who doesn't like gay people, or who doesn't like whatever people, doesn't like women, whatever it is, doesn't like certain individuals. We have had enough of this individual. You're supposed to be a teacher. You're supposed to come here and teach the kids, not bring your personal views into the classroom. And so you'll see a lot of this too, this militant attitude of these individuals, just from stuff like the Pledge of Allegiance, where they force kids to say the Pledge of Allegiance. And if the kid does not say the Pledge of Allegiance the way they want them to, somebody's going to have to pay for it. They're like extremely militant about that. Not even thinking about all of the other things that have happened throughout history that don't really hold up behind that flag as being positive. None whatsoever. So a lot of times you'll have these individuals that are in these classrooms, they're working with your kids, and they don't even like your kids. And there are people like that. Done enough to really be careful about who they let into these classrooms. But I think a lot of this too was because they didn't really have schools where they had Black teachers. They did have that, but they were always the lower performing schools, or the schools where they're all Black kids. So they have Black teachers. But now you have these schools where some of these teachers have been teaching since who knows how long. And I would say a majority of them are baby boomers. And so they already have their own personal political views. And so I'm not trying to put a label on every baby boomer as being a racist, but there's a majority that have a lot of, views that are very questionable. And so these are the ones that are pretty much, they're almost nearing retirement. And so you have a new group of teachers coming in that are younger, and maybe they have more book knowledge in terms of the newer curriculums and ways to approach teaching kids in a multicultural setting. But a lot of that isn't being utilized. What's being used is just teachers that have been there forever and they are not ready to retire yet. And they're using the same old things that they taught from way back when. They're still teaching it to the kids. And so that's why the Black youth are not really getting all of the knowledge about their history. They're just getting Western culture, or they're getting like the basics, like, the slave talk, and maybe not even that. And then some of it is always like looked at as, this is how they treated slaves, and this is how they yada, 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 and all that. But nothing, from what I've seen, I have not really seen, Black inventors, maybe one or two Black inventors, a multitude of Black inventors, or Black artists, Black, people who have made a lot of accomplishments in America. Not a lot of that is stressed enough to where it at least makes the kids feel a sense of pride in who they are. A lot of it is just really raced over pretty quickly, and it's always the talk about slavery. And that's a big problem, because that's not something that should be celebrated. That is not a happy time or a happy event. That is not something that kids should go away with thinking, oh, that's all we were, was slaves. And so, I think a lot of this was by design, the way they set the schools up. And so I don't know what your thoughts would be on this issue, but I'm sure this is also one of those things that you would say would be a pretty open-ended talk. It could go on forever, because it's really, it's about a lot of issues. And so it has to do with who is in charge of everything. And it's sad, because you do have some people that do get high up there in education, but unfortunately, they had a superintendent in LA who she passed. I guess she passed on her position to someone else because she had health issues, and then now we have someone else that is filling her seat, either indefinite or temporary. But, it's an unfortunate situation, but everything has to either be in black and white, where when you're teaching the kids, it's basic, or you'll have some teachers every now and then that go beyond and above the call of duty. But by far, I'll say this: teaching is not an easy job for anyone. And so with the way laws are changing, now they have teachers in the classrooms, and some of these classrooms, they want to be able to have knowledge on how to use a gun. And so I thought this would be a perfect topic to bring up if you have racism and discrimination in local schools, also even outside of California. Now that they're bringing about this issue of, the shootings and trying to furnish some teachers with guns. Now, some people will use protection for what it's intended, but how many teachers that harbor this type of anxiety and hate um, teaching in environments maybe that they're not even really accustomed to, teaching kids that they've never really had to deal with. And how comfortable as parents would you feel with a teacher that maybe they don't really, like Black people, or they don't like whatever people, whatever religion or whatever, or non-religious, it could be a number of issues. So with that being said, here, when I go down in here, it also talks about race and IQ science project, school and teachers. And so this, it reminds me when I see this, this is in Sacramento. And so a science fair, Klatchkey High School, and it is the latest in a series of racism scandals at Sacramento area schools. So according to this article, and so recent. So a student in Sacramento made an international headline when he put up a science fair project on race and IQ. So the high school sophomore presented a hypothesis that perhaps the lack of Black, Southeast Asian, and Hispanic students in the school's magnet program could be blamed on IQ differentials among various races. To support the hypothesis, the student had his peers take an online IQ test and then reported that non-Hispanic whites and Northeast Asians have an IQ average of 15 points over Blacks, and Southwest Asians and 10 points over non-white Hispanics. Okay. So parents and students went nuts, and the superintendent of the school then announced a district-wide review of the diversity throughout the school's city school programs. This is idiotic. And so, not because the kid was right, the project seemed silly at best. If, for example, the student wanted to prove that his magnet school class was representative of the people who passed a particular IQ threshold, he could have judged admittees and non-admittees as individuals rather than by race. And so even with all of what I just told you about the stuff that goes on in schools, you can see kids that exhibit this behavior because they've learned it. And so they harbor the same types of feelings, be it that it comes from their parents, or it could come from maybe other teachers that treat them a particular way or treat kids a particular way in the classrooms. And so this kid took it upon himself to do a project that had hypothesis about IQs of Blacks, Asians, and non-white Hispanics. And so I'm going to play the video. I am outraged by a demonstration of racism
At San Juan Unified School District, many African Americans and other minorities attend Mariloma High School, enrolled in various programs, with only a few within the International Baccalaureate Diploma program.
I was walking home from school. It was a normal day, really nice outside, and then all of a sudden, this truckload of about 4 or 5 boys rolls past with their windows heads sticking out, and they yell out the N-word, and then they zoom away. Nothing else said, just that one word, and it hurt.
Well, the main point.
Okay. That's a total other video. But anyway, that's just an incident that had occurred. Science project, and school teachers at school and the teachers, they had a big debate about that whole issue. And then you have several things that are happening on these campuses. So there was that viral video where also you had the teacher that was accused of calling the military the lowest of the low, and it was also on CNN. And so there's different forms of the discrimination or racism that play out in these schools. And so I don't think that people realize that these are the schools that you send your children to. A lot of times people feel like, okay, we're hoping that this will be a safe haven for kids, but it turns out it can be even, a worse situation than what you'd anticipated. Learning about all of the things that are going on, some views or comments on how you feel about the situation. Or you can just at least take this as information or be an informative topic, and how you should approach it. I would say to you as a parent to a parent, if you suspect that your kid is not being treated fairly at the school, it takes the parents to actually come together and act on situations that they feel are either not safe or not fair or discriminatory practices or shows of racism and that there's a definite problem in their school. But you have to have more than one person come forward, because a lot of times the schools, they have lawyers, they have other lawsuits that are pending, and there's other complaints about other issues. So they're pretty much well equipped to handle situations like those. It's just that you have to get enough people to have an incident that is big enough for them to actually take action upon. And you'd have to meet with several people. A lot of times they will try to ignore your request. You may have to do a lot to get them to pay attention and to listen to your side of the story. But know this, that there's teachers that have a union that support them. They don't easily get fired. A lot of times they get moved to other school districts, or they'll get moved to another position, more often than termination. And so it's the same thing like the teacher of a middle school. This incident happened where this teacher, he was at a middle school, told students not to date African American students. And so his picture will probably come up. And so a teacher tells his class not to date African Americans because they're not worth it. So this one also comes up, and this was written by Paul P. Murphy. And so instructor that was talking. This actually is in Florida, though, which I'm not surprised either. So he's been suspended. Like I said, they don't really fire them. They suspend them or they move them to another school, but they don't get fired. So this is a perfect example. Florida teacher has been suspended after his school district concluded he repeatedly used the N-word in class, told his 7th and 8th graders not to date African Americans because they're not worth it, among other violations. David Swinyar, who says he is white, in his personal file teaches math at Kernan, or was it Kernan? Oh yeah, Kernan Middle School in Jacksonville. So the school has about 1,148 students, 22.6% of whom are African American. So just after lunch on October the 6th, 2017, a student told a school board investigator that the teacher Swinier and the students were discussing relationships. So if your boyfriend says bad things to you or he treats you wrong, that means he's acting like the N-word. Swinier said, according to the student's testimony in the school's district investigative report, you all should not be dating all these different African American boys because they're not worth it. So that is the article right there. And in what appears to be a separate incident covered in the investigative report, students said Swinier made other racial remarks in August of 2017. According to the report, Swinier used the N-word during an argument with a student. If my daughter was dating someone who is an effing word, I would have any respect for that inner. A student recalls Swinier saying, according to the investigative report, another student then confronted Swinier about using the racial slur. He denied using it, and the school counselor, quoting a student, reported that Swinier said, if Swinier's daughter was dating someone and that inner said the effing word, I would beat him up. After he was confronted by the student, the other student said, Swinier said, I would never say that, but if I did, I am sorry. So there's a 10-day suspension, and he reportedly said that he attended an African-American church, and students said that he made fun of the preacher's preaching style. And the district also concluded that the report that Swinier made inappropriate comments to students, such as calling them dumb. And CNN reached out to Swinier for a comment, but has not received a response. He probably won't, of course. Florida's teacher union, there we go, teachers unions. The Florida's Education Association declined to comment on the situation Thursday because I'll tell you, let me stop there. The teachers unions protect the teachers, even if they are racist. So one of the FEA's core values is the value of respect and diversity among individuals, said FEA. So that's the Florida Education Association. So Communication Director Sharon Nesvig, when asked the organization's general policy on racist language in the classroom, so clearly FEA is opposed to using racial slurs and derogatory language inside and out the classroom. They say this, but that doesn't mean they're going to follow it. So I'm letting you know this is coming from my mouth. Swinier received a 10-day suspension. Okay, so they did not pay him for the 10-day suspension for the behaviors documented in the district investigation. So CNN affiliate, blah, 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 reports Swinier will also get a letter of reprimand and a mandatory referral to the Employee Assistance Program. So after the story was published and CNN was sent a letter, Duval County School Superintendent Patricia Willis sent to the school board members on Thursday afternoon. That letter further outlined what the district's plan was to do with Swinyard. So they're still contemplating what they're going to do with him. Following the employee suspension without pay, he will be reassigned to an appropriate district position with no contact with students. There we go. Let me stop here. So it's like what I was telling you. If they moved, sometimes they're not firing him. They suspended him. Yeah, it might be written down, but they're going to remove him from the classroom. So he could probably be working in the office in HR. You know, he could end up working in a district office at the school or with the school board. You know, he could be working in one of those positions as long as it isn't with groups of students. So this goes back to what I was saying. So I'm telling you from experience that I know this is what they do in these schools. A lot of times they won't fire these people, even though they should be, you know, laid off, or they should just not even be working around. So their approach is to have him in an environment where he's not around students, but he's around other adults, and that he's, you know, not, you know, in contact with people's kids. So that's how they're going to approach it. So as an annual contract employee, Mr. Swinyard's employment contract with the district expires June 30th, 2018. In May, recommendations for contract renewals for all annual employees will be considered. So records indicate Swinyard has taught in the Duval County board system since 2012. So he's been a teacher there since then. So I'm sure that some of this stuff has happened before now. And so he just happened to get caught, basically. And so that's a lot what happens to a lot of these teachers. They have to get caught. And it has to be something really bad enough to where that they feel, if people make a big stir out of it, like what happened to this guy, if it's enough for them to say, we got to do something about this, you know, we can't, you know, especially when the media is involved. When it goes viral, that's when they have to act. They have no other alternative but to act. You know, they heard this teacher calling the other African-American, that African-American teacher, the N-word or whatever, or they, you know, they see there's different children in the classroom. They treat one child one way and the other child another way. And clearly everybody can see it, you know. Those are things it can't be denied. They can't get out of. And then too, in this case, when you see this, there were more than one kid that complained about this. So you notice the first kid, they didn't really do anything about it. But when this incident happened, and it also went viral, they noticed how they had to go back to the first incident that was reported and say, you know what, there's a pattern here. And there's more than one kid complaining. You see how long, and still even with that, he's suspended. He's not losing his job. So that I'm just basically in these local schools. And it's not just Florida, it's here in California too. So I just pretty much laid out some incidents. That's just a few. There's many more things that have not been caught on camera, or, you know, a lot of times people will try to set other teachers up to get fired who really don't deserve to be fired. And, you know, they just don't like it because maybe they don't like that teacher because, you know, they don't hire certain teachers from certain religions, or they don't hire a lot of African American teachers. A lot of times, this is my personal view right here. And I feel like the reason why they don't hire a lot of Black teachers is because they know you're going to teach them real history. You know, you're going to teach about Black history, how it really is. You're not going to teach that Western version of history. You're gonna incorporate some of that, but you're gonna incorporate some of the new ideas and some of the things that are not just new, but they've already been around. They'll be new to these kids that have not been exposed to it. And so they'll be new to also the African American children who are not getting taught of what was civilization before slavery. Were there freed colored men that were free? Things like that. They're going to get a well-rounded view of the world, not just a narrow sense of seeing things. And that's what these teachers are usually doing. They go in these classrooms and they just do the basic stuff, and they have all these biases and these views, and then they put their hate out in the classroom and they exhibit it towards the students. And so a lot of times the students are afraid of them because they're afraid that their grade is going to reflect how that teacher feels about them. So a lot of times they won't report. And so they say things to the kids, well, if you say this and this, and I'll just say this and this, and this is how your grade's going to look. And so this is what you get from some of these individuals that are teaching in these schools that are like this. And so anyway, I'm going to let this video go without saying that this is what your kids are exposed to. So a lot of this stuff is learned. So some of these kids, either they feel empowered or they feel devalued in these classrooms. So what are your thoughts on this issue? And thanks for listening.